There's a certain kind of betrayal that doesn't hit you all at once. It leaks in, slow, quiet, until suddenly you realize your whole life was built on someone else's lie. For me, it started over pot roast and mashed potatoes, just a normal family dinner. Or so I thought. We were at my parents' house, the same 2-story colonial I grew up in, a house they called their pride, their reward, the proof of all they had sacrificed for me. I used to believe that. They told me they saved for years, that they worked 2 jobs, skipped vacations, built their life brick by brick. This house was always the crown jewel of that story, tangible evidence of their struggle and success. And for most of my life, I swallowed that narrative like communion. I showed up for dinners like this one, quiet, polite, and always a little on edge. My partner sat beside me, ever the peacemaker. My father talked about taxes. My mother bragged about her new kitchen appliances. I smiled, nodded, endured. Then Grandpa spoke. He'd been mostly silent during dinner, focused on his food, humming under his breath. But now, he looked up at me with that gentle, proud smile of his, and he said, "So, are you enjoying the house I bought you?" At first, I thought he was confused, but before I continue my story, let me know in the comments where you're from, because I would love to know that my story is reaching different places. Also, if you enjoy, subscribe. It will really help the story reach more people. I laughed lightly. "What?" Grandpa repeated it, a little louder this time. He said, "This house. I bought it for you when you were born. I hope you're enjoying it." My fork stopped midair. Across the table, my mother froze. My father's jaw clenched. My partner turned slowly toward me, confused. I looked at Grandpa again. He was still smiling, like he hadn't just cracked open the floor beneath us. "You bought this house?" I asked. Grandpa nodded. "Of course. Paid in full. Gave it to your parents with one condition, that it would belong to you when you were ready." He looked around the dining room, clearly proud. "It was meant to be your security. I never wanted you worrying about rent or landlords. I told them that, clear as day." I couldn't breathe. I looked at my parents. My mother spoke first. Her voice was sharp, panicked. "Dad, we don't need to get into all that." But Grandpa frowned. "What do you mean? I assumed she knew by now." My father cleared his throat. "It's not that simple." I said, my voice low but shaking, "You told me you bought this house yourselves." My mother's lips tightened. "We did buy it. We made this a home. We've paid for everything in it." Grandpa looked confused now. "But the deed was in her name. I never signed it over to you. You said it would be easier if she didn't know until she was older." "I was older 10 years ago," I said, barely above a whisper. No one responded. My partner reached under the table and squeezed my hand. And suddenly, everything came into focus. Every time they called this our house. Every time I'd visited and felt like a guest in a place that was supposedly mine. Every time I asked for help and was told, "We're not in a position to support you." Every time I'd believed I was a burden. I had been struggling to survive in tiny, overpriced apartments, while they were living, rent-free, in the house my grandfather bought for me. They didn't tell me. They didn't ask. They just moved in, claimed it, and pretended it had always been theirs. My father said, "It was always meant to benefit the family. That includes us." "No," Grandpa said firmly. "It was meant for her. I was very clear." Silence fell over the room. I stared down at the table. My childhood placemats, my mother's fancy flatware, the painting in the hallway that I'd drawn in 3rd grade, framed like a trophy on a wall I apparently owned and never knew. When I finally spoke, my voice was calm. You let me believe this house was your success story. My mother said nothing. You told me, I continued, that you built this from scratch, that I should be grateful for everything you gave me, and all this time. I looked at Grandpa. He looked like he wanted to cry. I thought you knew, he said gently. I'm so sorry. I truly thought they told you. I nodded, slowly. Then I stood up, pushing my chair back without a word. Where are you going? My father asked. I looked at him, and I said, I need to think. In my house. And then I walked out the front door. I used to think struggle was just part of growing up. That feeling like you were always 2 steps behind everyone else was normal. That worrying about money, housing, safety, that was just what life was. I thought it made me stronger, sharper. But now I know better. I know now that my struggle wasn't natural. It was engineered. Because while I was drowning, they were living comfortably in a house that was never meant for them. A house that was mine. But let me start from the beginning. When I was a teenager, my parents loved to give lectures about sacrifice. My father used to say, "We built this house from nothing. No handouts, no shortcuts. Every floorboard in this place cost us something." And my mother? Her favorite phrase was, "Hard work runs in this family. Don't expect anyone to hand you anything." I heard it so many times I started repeating it to myself, especially during the hard years, the lean years, the years I now realize didn't have to be that way. When I got my first job at 16, bussing tables after school, I came home exhausted, feet aching, still in my uniform. I remember telling my mom, "They're short-staffed. I might pick up weekends too." She nodded and said, "Good. You'll appreciate money more when you earn it yourself." Not once did she ask if I needed a break, if I was okay, if I was balancing it with school. It wasn't about care. It was about pride. About proving I could tough it out like they claimed to have done. When I left for college, it only got worse. I had no financial support, no car, no safety net. They said, "You've got to figure it out like we did." So I did, or tried to. I took out loans, worked late nights in the campus bookstore, picked up tutoring gigs. Some semesters I worked 3 jobs just to afford rent and groceries. I shared a 1-bedroom apartment with 2 other girls and ate rice and frozen peas most nights. And when I called home, my mother would say, "That's life, it builds character." My father would grunt, "We didn't have it easy either." But they did. They were living in a fully paid-off home, a home someone else bought for them, a home that was never even meant for them to begin with. And they were sitting in it, drinking wine on the porch, judging my struggle while pretending they had earned every brick beneath their feet. Meanwhile, I was breaking. I remember one winter, junior year, I couldn't make rent. My roommate bailed last minute, and my paycheck got delayed. I called my mother, my hands were shaking, my pride already in pieces. I said, "I just need help covering this month. I can pay you back." She paused, then said, "We're not in a position to help you. You made this choice." I said, "You're living in a 4-bedroom house, please." She replied, "And we worked for it?" I slept in my car that week, 3 nights, parked behind a 24-hour diner. I'd go inside in the mornings to use the bathroom and wash my face in the sink, then head to class. Like nothing was wrong. My professors never knew. My friends never guessed. But my parents? They knew I was struggling, and they chose to call it building resilience, all while they were warm, comfortable, safe, in a house my grandfather had bought for me. I didn't find out until years later, of course. I didn't know then. All I had was their story. We did this on our own. You should too. I lived under that lie like it was law. When I graduated, early, with honors, I got a voicemail from my father. He said, "See? All that pressure paid off. That's the difference between us and other families. We don't coddle our kids." Coddle. I nearly laughed when I heard it. I hadn't been coddled. I'd been abandoned, used, and then applauded for surviving it. Even after college, things didn't get easier. I worked in a city I couldn't afford, took unpaid internships, lived on instant noodles and gas station coffee. I couldn't afford therapy. I developed stress-induced migraines. I cried in public restrooms more times than I can count. But every time I considered asking for help, I heard their voices in my head. We didn't get help. We figured it out. You'll be better for it. And they were saying all of that from the comfort of my house, the one Grandpa bought for me. I remember one summer I came to stay for a weekend just to see them. I brought my own groceries. I did all the dishes. I folded the laundry without being asked. My mother still said, "I don't like guests staying more than 2 nights. It disrupts the flow of the house." I said, "I'm not a guest." She gave me a tight smile and said, "Well, it's not your house, is it?" I didn't respond. I just nodded. Swallowed it. But now, I can't stop thinking about that moment. She said that while standing in a foyer my grandfather paid for. She told me I didn't belong in a house that had my name behind its purchase, a gift that was stolen before I ever got to open it. They didn't just take space. They took credit. They took ownership. And they made me feel ashamed for not having what they were hoarding. They let me beg, break, bleed, so they could keep playing the role of the successful parents, the self-made providers, the noble martyrs. They watched me burn just so their lie could shine a little brighter. And the worst part? They looked me in the eye the whole time, smiled, patted my back, told me to be proud of how strong I'd become, but strength built on betrayal isn't strength, it's survival. And now I know the truth. They didn't just take a house, they erased what I was supposed to have. I didn't speak again for the rest of that dinner, not to my parents, not to my partner, not even to Grandpa, not because I didn't have anything to say, but because if I opened my mouth, I didn't trust what would come out. Not yet. I helped clear the dishes like I always did. I smiled when I had to. I even thanked my mother for the meal. She nodded like nothing had happened, like the words Grandpa had spoken weren't still echoing through every hallway of that house. But the silence between us was heavy now, thick, loud. My father avoided eye contact. My mother chatted about her hydrangeas. But Grandpa kept looking at me like he knew. So when the dishes were done, and my partner had stepped outside to take a call, I asked softly, "Can we talk for a minute?" He followed me to the back patio without hesitation. The sky was deep blue. The porch light buzzed overhead. And for a second, I wondered if this was how he had always imagined I'd feel in this house, safe, settled. We sat in the old metal chairs, the ones that creaked when you shifted. And I finally turned to him and said, "What you said earlier about the house, you meant it?" He blinked. Of course I meant it. "I just need you to be completely honest," I said. "You bought this house for me?" Grandpa nodded, firm. "Yes, I did." He looked at me then, his voice softer. "When you were born, I wanted you to have something permanent, something stable. I knew your parents would struggle for a while, so I told them I was buying the house for you. It would be in a trust. They'd live here, take care of it, and pass it on to you when you were ready." My chest tightened. "And you told them that?" He nodded again. I was clear. I said, "This is hers. You're just holding it until she's grown." They agreed. I swallowed hard. "You thought I was living here?" He paused. "Aren't you?" I looked at him, and all I could do was shake my head. "No," I whispered. "I've never lived here as an adult. They said it was theirs. I thought they bought it." He looked stunned. "But the trust—" He trailed off, rubbing his forehead. "They told me you didn't want it. That you moved for work. That you weren't interested in staying close." "I was living in a studio apartment with a broken radiator," I said. "I wasn't uninterested. I was struggling." He leaned forward. "They never said that." Of course they didn't. Because the second they admitted I was struggling, the lie would start to crack. If they had said, "Our daughter's sleeping in her car while we live in a home that was gifted to her," someone might have asked questions. They couldn't risk that. So they painted me as distant, uninterested, ungrateful. And I believed it. I leaned back in the chair and stared at the ceiling of the patio. For a few seconds, neither of us said a word. Then I asked, "Is the trust still active?" He nodded slowly. "It should be. I'd have to look at the paperwork. It was never dissolved, never transferred, just left in place." That was all I needed. That night, when I got back to my apartment, I opened my laptop and started digging. I pulled county property records. I searched trust registrations. I combed through digital archives, trying to track down anything with my name attached to it. It took hours. At one point, my partner walked into the room and asked, "Everything okay?" I said, "I think my parents stole a house from me." They stared at me, waiting for the punchline, but there wasn't one. The documents weren't easy to find, but they were there, quiet, buried, old. And on one of them, in scanned black ink, faded but legible, was my name, a revocable trust, dated when I was just a toddler, the grantor, my grandfather, the beneficiary, me, and the property listed, the same house I'd sat in that very evening. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I printed it. And then I printed everything else I could find. Emails, tax documents, a copy of a notarized letter from Grandpa that had been submitted with the original trust. It was all there, just buried. It hit me then, sitting at my kitchen table, surrounded by paper and silence. They never expected me to look. They never thought I'd question them, because why would I? They raised me to believe they were generous, that their home was something I could borrow, but never own, that my job was to say thank you, then leave it behind. But now I had proof. This house wasn't just a symbol of their false success. It was mine, and they'd stolen it. They weren't just squatters. They weren't just liars. They were thieves. They took the one thing that was meant to give me peace and used it to build a kingdom of control. I stared at the old notary stamp at the bottom of the trust document, my name printed beneath it, and I felt something in me shift. This wasn't just about justice anymore. It was about reclamation. Because I hadn't just lost a house. I'd lost time, stability, safety, my sense of place in the world. And they walked around inside it every day like nothing was wrong. But now I had the key. Not metaphorically, literally. The next day, I called Grandpa. He answered on the second ring. He said, "I found the original folder. It's all there. If you want to move forward, I'll help you." I said, "Thank you, I do." His voice was steady. "It should have never come to this." "I know," I replied. "But now that it has, I'm not going to let it slide." Because this wasn't just a lie anymore. It was theft. And I wasn't just going to expose them. I was going to take it back. I've always believed that revenge doesn't have to be loud. It can be quiet, deliberate. Paperwork instead of shouting. Signatures instead of screaming. And now, I had all the paperwork I needed. The morning after Grandpa confirmed everything, I made an appointment with a real estate attorney. Her name was Karina. Sharp, methodical, no nonsense. She didn't blink when I slid a thick folder across her desk. Documents, trust paperwork, scanned property records. She asked, "Do they currently reside in the house?" I nodded. "They've lived there for over 30 years. And you?" "I've never spent more than a weekend there. They told me it was theirs." Karina looked over the trust documents in silence. After a few minutes, she sat back in her chair and said, "The trust was never revoked. You are the legal beneficiary. They have no claim of ownership." I exhaled. "So what can I do?" She replied, "What do you want to do?" I stared at her, and I said, "I want the house. I want it back." She nodded. "Then we start by updating the deed. Legally, they've been occupying your property without authority. That ends now." She drew up the paperwork. It was dry, technical, clean. By the end of the week, the property was in my name, on record, on file, in law. They had no idea what was coming. The next step was notice. Karina handled that too. A formal letter, delivered by courier with a notarized cover page. Simple, precise, undeniable. It was addressed to both of my parents. Effective immediately, you are in unlawful possession of property legally owned by your daughter. You are instructed to vacate the premises within 60 days. Failure to do so will result in legal action. I didn't wait for their response. I didn't need to. 2 days later, my phone rang. It was my mother. She didn't even say hello. She shouted, "What the hell is this?" I held the phone to my ear, quiet. She said, "You had the nerve to send us an eviction notice?" "Are you kidding me?" I replied, calm and measured. "No, I'm not kidding." "This is our home," she snapped. "We raised you here. We built our life here." I said, "You built your life inside something that was never yours. That's not the same thing." "You're being cruel," she hissed. "We took care of this house. We maintained it. We made it beautiful." "And you did all that," I said, "under a lie." My mother paused. Then she said, quieter, "You're doing this just to punish us." I replied, "No. I'm doing this to correct a theft. You lied. For years. You pretended this gift was yours. You let me struggle while you lived in something meant for me. We didn't think you'd understand back then." "Understand what?" I asked. "That Grandpa gave me something and you took it?" "You're right. I wouldn't have understood, because I never would have done that to you." She went silent for a few seconds. Then she said bitterly, "You'll regret this one day." I said, "No. I'll regret how long I stayed quiet." She scoffed. "You're being dramatic." "No," I said. "I'm being honest. Something you should have tried." She raised her voice again. "Where are we supposed to go?" I didn't flinch. I said, "Anywhere but my house." And then I ended the call. That was the last time I spoke to her directly. I let my lawyer handle everything from that point on. The official notice held. The county records were updated. The title now listed my name alone. It was done. They had 60 days. 60 days to pack up the life they built on borrowed space. 60 days to look at the walls and the furniture and the photos on the mantel and realize none of it was really theirs. They had played house in a home that was never theirs. And now? Now the curtain was down. I got one email from my father. It was short, cold. He wrote, "You've embarrassed us. I hope you're happy." I didn't reply, but I wanted to write back. Happy? Number not yet. But free? Absolutely. In the weeks that followed, I got updates through my lawyer. My parents tried to stall, claimed they needed more time, said they were emotionally overwhelmed. Karina sent one line back. "Ownership is not emotional. It's legal. Vacate or face court." They started packing. I didn't go near the house during that time. I didn't drive by. I didn't ask for photos. I didn't want to see them try to make it look noble. I didn't want to witness the performance of struggle they'd conveniently discovered now that the lie was over. What I wanted was the truth, and I finally had it. I thought often about Grandpa during those weeks, about how heavy this must have weighed on him, how many times he probably wanted to speak up and didn't, how relieved he looked when I told him I was handling it. He called once, just to say, "If you ever need help settling in, you just let me know." I told him, "I think the worst part is realizing how long I let them treat me like a guest in my own story." He said, "Not anymore." And he was right. Because now, for the first time in my life, I had something that couldn't be taken. Not given, not borrowed and rewritten. Mine. Fully legally, undeniably mine. All it took was one line on a document, one signature, and a truth they thought they'd buried. They never imagined I'd dig it up. But I did. And I buried the lie instead. They didn't go quietly. Of course they didn't. People like that never do. People who build their entire identity on a lie rarely know how to leave gracefully once it crumbles. My parents spent years telling the world they had earned their house, built their life from scratch, sacrificed everything for their success. So when the truth came out, that the house wasn't theirs, never was, and never would be, they didn't fall apart. They pivoted. It started with emails. Subject line, "Let's talk." My mother wrote, "There must be a way we can work this out without uprooting everything. Surely we can come to a solution that works for all of us." I didn't respond. The next day my father called. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail instead. He said, "We're willing to discuss transferring partial ownership. Maybe a shared arrangement. You don't need to make this a legal battle." I sent one message back through my lawyer. "This is not a negotiation. The house is mine. You have 60 days. Then the guilt started. My mother texted, "We've been under so much stress lately. Moving will only make things worse. Please don't do this to us." She followed up with, "Your father's blood pressure has been unstable. He's been seeing a doctor. This kind of shock could be dangerous." I stared at the screen, heart cold. I typed back, "You should have thought of that before you stole from me." And then I muted their numbers. They tried to spin the story to others too. I heard about it through cousins, mutual friends, even one of my old high school teachers. "She's taking their house," they whispered. "They gave her everything, and this is how she repays them? She's turning on her own family." But I didn't flinch, because I knew the truth. And so did Grandpa. He called me one afternoon, just after the notice had gone out. He said, "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry." I sat down on the edge of my couch. "You don't have to apologize." "Yes, I do," he said. "I trusted them. I thought I was doing the right thing, giving them a place to raise you, to create a home until you were ready." "You had no idea they'd twist it," I said. "I should have known," he replied. "I saw the signs, the way they talked about the house, the way they acted like it was theirs. I should have stepped in sooner." I let that hang in the air for a few seconds. Then I said, "You stepped in now. That's what matters." He paused. "How are you feeling?" I answered honestly. Angry, relieved, sad, proud. He chuckled softly. "That sounds about right." After we hung up, I sat in silence for a long time. Not because I was lost, but because for once I was still, centered. And then I started planning. I gave them their 60 days. I didn't shorten it. I didn't push them out early. I gave them the full, legal, generous window to leave. And while they packed up their lives, I began quietly designing mine. The first thing I did was strip the house of their presence, at least in my mind. I stopped thinking of it as their home. I stopped remembering their lies in the walls. I started picturing it the way I wanted it to be, bright, open, quiet, mine. I hired a contractor to evaluate the foundation, the plumbing, the roof. I made a list of what I wanted to change, what I wanted to reclaim. I stood in the living room one afternoon and looked around slowly. The curtains, gone. The framed family photos, removed. The fake florals in ornate glass bowls, tossed. Every part of the home that had once said this belongs to them was either donated or destroyed. Because this wasn't their shrine anymore. It was my start. I started painting on weekends, just one wall at a time, neutral tones, warm wood, linen instead of leather, light instead of heaviness. I opened the windows, I lit candles, I played music, and slowly it began to feel different. Not haunted, not stolen, just real. I replaced the dining chairs they used for every smug holiday dinner. I donated the glass coffee table I was never allowed to touch as a kid. I scrubbed every tile in the bathroom with my bare hands until it no longer felt like I was cleaning up after them, but preparing something for me. I found a journal my mother had left in the top drawer of her bedside table. I didn't read it. I closed it gently, packed it in a box, and labeled it, "Return to Sender." I wasn't interested in their excuses anymore. One afternoon, a neighbor stopped by as I was watering the new garden bed I'd installed along the fence. She said, "Your parents said they were moving somewhere smaller, downsizing." I smiled and said, "That's one way to describe it." She looked at the house behind me. "They always acted like this place was everything to them." I looked at her and replied, "It was never theirs to begin with." She blinked. Then she said, "Well, it suits you better anyway." I nodded. It's finally being lived in by someone honest. The 60 days came and went. They were gone. No goodbye, no dramatic standoff, just a moving truck that showed up one morning and pulled away before sunset. I watched from the upstairs window. Then I walked down the stairs, into my kitchen, poured my tea, sat at my table, and let myself breathe. Not cry, not rage, just breathe. Because this house, this gift, was no longer a symbol of what they took from me. It was what I took back. They used it like a throne. I'm turning it back into a home. It started small, just a comment here, a question there. I heard your parents moved. What happened to the house? Oh, your folks are renting now? Thought they owned that place for decades. Whispers. Hushed conversations at family gatherings I no longer attended. Messages from cousins I hadn't spoken to in years, pretending to check in but clearly fishing for gossip. I ran into your mom at the pharmacy, one wrote. She looked tired. Another text came from an aunt I barely knew. Your father says the situation has been hard on them, that they tried to do what was best for you. Best for me? Number. They did what was best for their image. They used a gift meant for me, a literal roof over my head, as a pedestal for their self-made narrative. And when the truth came out, their first instinct wasn't to make amends. It was to protect the lie. And still, they wanted sympathy. I never said a word to anyone. Not to my cousins, not to their friends, not to the neighbors who started avoiding eye contact when I pulled into the driveway. Let them wonder. Let them speculate. I didn't owe anyone an explanation for reclaiming what was mine. Meanwhile, my life moved forward. My business, something I had started quietly, long ago, on borrowed time and sheer will, was finally thriving. With the stability of a real home, my focus sharpened. Clients came more consistently. Word of mouth turned into referrals. Referrals turned into a waiting list. There were mornings I'd open my laptop at the sunlit dining table and feel something I hadn't in years: peace. Real peace. Not the kind that comes from keeping quiet to avoid conflict, but the kind that grows when you finally stop giving parts of yourself away to people who never earned them. I took walks around the neighborhood. I made tea without flinching at every creak in the floorboards. I slept through the night. I let myself exist, fully, freely, inside the space that was always meant to be mine. And across town, my parents were adjusting. They found a small rental, 1 bedroom, no yard, no walk-in closets or sunroom, just enough space for the 2 of them and their silence. They didn't invite anyone over. No housewarming posts, no casual bragging about new appliances, just a blank Instagram and a few awkward updates passed through relatives. "Your mom says the new place is fine," my uncle told me once. I nodded. "Good. She's not used to sharing walls, though," he added. "And your dad, he's not doing great." I didn't reply, because it wasn't my burden anymore. They'd spent years basking in the admiration that came with pretending to be generous providers, telling everyone they'd given me so much, sacrificed so much. But the truth? They never gave me that house. They took it. And when it was time to face that, they didn't apologize. They looked for sympathy. I got another message from my cousin Brianna. She wrote, "Your mom said she wishes you two were closer. That maybe this got out of hand." Out of hand, like it was a misunderstanding, not theft. I didn't reply. Then, one quiet Tuesday afternoon, I got an email. Subject line: "Hi." It was from my father. The body of the message was short, just a few lines. "We've been thinking about you. We miss you. I know things have been hard. Can we talk?" No apology, no ownership, just a hand extended, not in remorse, but in discomfort, because now they were the ones uncomfortable. And I was fine. I read the email twice. Then I closed the tab and made myself lunch. I didn't delete it. I didn't respond. I didn't even tell Grandpa. Because that moment, more than any legal battle or notarized deed, was the proof I needed. They weren't sorry, they were exposed. And what they really missed wasn't me. It was control. The ability to shape the story, to bend perception, to hold the upper hand while calling it love. But that chapter was over. Let them sit in the silence they once demanded from me. Let them feel the distance they created when they chose pride over honesty. Let them remember every time they brushed me aside in my own home. Because the truth? I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't hungry for justice or desperate for validation. I was content. And when someone tries to guilt trip you from a position of discomfort, contentment is the loudest answer you can give. They wanted credit for giving me what they stole. I wanted the truth. And now I had it, all of it, in writing, in memory, in every corner of this house they never truly owned. And the best part? I didn't need to say a word. No, Brie. The day Grandpa moved into the guest suite, he stood in the doorway for a long time, longer than I expected. I watched him run his hand along the frame of the door, the edge of the dresser, the little bookshelf I'd set up with his old hardcovers, and a reading lamp I thought he might like. He turned to me, eyes a little glassy. Grandpa said softly, "I thought I'd be here sooner." I nodded. "Me too." Then we both smiled. That moment didn't need grand speeches. We understood what had been lost and what had finally been found. I had spent so many years walking on eggshells, trying not to take up too much space. But now, with the deed in my name and the locks changed, the house didn't just feel different. It felt mine. The kind of mine that lives in your chest. The kind you don't need to perform or apologize for. I repainted the hallway, bright, warm colors, hung up prints from artists I loved. Some were friends, others were strangers whose work spoke to a version of myself I hadn't met yet. The backyard, once a place where I wasn't allowed to host my friends because it wasn't a good time, became a haven. String lights, potted herbs, a patio heater for colder months. Grandpa liked to sit out there in the mornings, coffee in hand, a blanket over his knees. "This is how it should have always been," Grandpa said one morning. I replied, "It still can be." I wasn't building a fortress. I was building a home. And this time, I opened the doors on my terms. Friends dropped by more often. Some came just to work alongside me during the day. Others stayed for dinner, wine, quiet music playing through speakers I could finally afford. "This place feels good," my friend Maya said during one of our movie nights. She looked around, smile wide. "It just feels like you." And it did. Because every cushion, every coffee mug, every shelf and corner had been touched by someone who saw me, not tolerated me, not used me, not guilted me into gratitude, but saw me. My business grew. What had started as a freelance side gig turned into a small consultancy. I set up a home office, one that didn't double as a bedroom or a laundry corner. Clients came and went. My website got a refresh. My name got passed around in circles that once would have ignored me. It wasn't about being flashy. It was about being free, about showing up without asking permission to exist. One evening, I hosted a small gathering. Not a party, a dinner, 12 people, hand-picked, no performance, no forced toasts, just people who had shown up in my life when I needed them most. We sat around the table, candles flickering, food steaming, laughter bouncing between walls that had once echoed with silence. Grandpa raised his glass. "To honesty," he said, "to love that doesn't hide, and to the ones who remember where the gifts really came from." Everyone clinked glasses. I smiled and said, "To building new things, on land that was always meant for us." After dessert, we moved to the backyard. Someone brought out a guitar. Someone else lit the fire pit. I curled up in my favorite chair with a mug of tea and just listened. There was no jealousy, no performative smiles, no backhanded comments about who paid for what, just warmth. I kept thinking back to those years when I'd tiptoe through this very house, afraid to say the wrong thing. How I'd stay silent while my parents held court in the kitchen, bragging about what we've built. How I'd sleep on a friend's floor 2 cities away while my house hosted dinner parties I wasn't invited to. And now? Now Grandpa lived in the guest suite. Now laughter came from a place of peace, not politics. Now I could breathe. I didn't need to send one final message to my parents. No postcard, no gloating text. They weren't blocked, but they were gone. I imagined they drove past sometimes. That maybe, late at night, they slowed down as they passed the house. Wondered who was inside. Wondered how things had turned out this way. They probably told people a version of the story where I was ungrateful. Too proud. Too cold. But I wasn't. I had just learned that silence only protects those who lie. And I was done protecting anyone who couldn't honor what was true. The truth? They borrowed something that was never theirs. They lived off it, lied about it, used it to build their image while convincing me that I should be thankful just to visit. They thought they'd taken something from me, but what they really did was hand me the proof of who they were. And once I saw that clearly, I didn't need their explanations. I didn't need their version because I had my own, and I was living in it every day, under a roof that was always mine.